It's been 100 years since a black community in Tulsa was intentionally burned to the ground, killing hundreds of African Americans.
Barbaric violence was committed against black people across this country.
Kerosene was dropped from an airplane.
Why did nobody ever teach us this? Because they didn't want you to know.
When it was an opportunity to wipe out a community, they took it.
Well, a new documentary, Rise Again, Tulsa and the Red Summer, is bringing those events into the forefront. Joining us is the filmmaker behind this feature, Don Porter. Good morning, Don. So good to see you.
Morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This is a very important story. It had to be tough, though, to bring to the screen, not only in telling the story, but studying and learning about it as well.
You know, it was tough, but I think it was necessary. I actually felt a great pride in understanding the story and understanding all of the elements of the story. Because what we learned is, first of all, how resilient and resistant Black people were to the terror that was perpetrated against them. But we also learned that the reason that these communities were targeted was because they were successful. And so if you understand that story of Black history, that success bred envy and then violence, that's a history that we should understand as well.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this, because it seems like it was seemingly left out of the history books, right? When did you yourself first hear of the Tulsa Massacre, and where, as we're now at the 100-year mark?
You know, I had done 4 short films for the Smithsonian African American Museum of History and Culture. And that was the first time, that was about 6 years ago. And that was the first time that I saw the footage of the Tulsa Massacre. But I had no idea about the extent of Red Summer, which is the period before Tulsa. There were more than 25 massacres across America targeting Black people, targeting Black communities. And if you look at the reasons why they were targeted for trying to unionize. They were targeted for, you know, soldiers coming back from World War I who had fought bravely, were pushing for their rights. So these stories are repeated in our history. And the way that we can understand and move past this violent past is to acknowledge it, to apologize for it, and to make sure that we do enough education so that it doesn't happen again.
Yes.
And that's the reason for this film.
Absolutely. And speaking of that education, you talked about when you first learned about it. Do you think children, students should be learning about the Tulsa Massacre and similar events in history classes? Because it seems like a lot, as Dan had mentioned, of this has been left out as we grew up reading these textbooks.
I think it's essential for children of an appropriate age to learn about all of our American history. And that is, you know, not only do we learn about the violence, but we learn about how people survived it and how they came back from it. And that is a story that's really important also to share. And, you know, I wish that I had learned about these events when I was in high school, when I was in college. I think it would have helped me make sense of some of the things that we're seeing today.
Yeah.
You know, we saw people, we saw a mob storming a Capitol in order to lynch someone. Very reminiscent of some of the events that have happened recently. If we knew that there was a history to that and studied the reasons why that occurred, perhaps we could avoid some of the more terrible things that are happening currently for all of us.
It reminds me locally of a story here in Central Park, the Seneca Village. It was less violent, but people were really booted out of their homes. It was the first kind of story of eminent domain left out of the history books, right? And people didn't know about it. So it's just so important to have these things documented, and that's why your film is so important. Premiering, by the way, a day ahead of Juneteenth, going to air in 172 countries, 43 languages. I mean, that's going to mean something to have it told in so many languages.
You know, you just give me a chill saying that. I'm so grateful to National Geographic. When they came to me last spring and asked if I wanted to do something about it, they originally proposed an hour. And once we started doing the research and found out about all of these other massacres, they, you know, immediately gave us the go-ahead to make it 2 hours. So it's a 2-hour special. It is certainly tough, but I also hope that people will see the resilience and strength and courage of so many Black people who continuously, just decades out of slavery, built these thriving communities, and then they rebuilt them once they were destroyed.
Yeah.
The lessons are so important. Now, you also directed the documentary John Lewis, Good Trouble. So we are learning so much from the works that you're putting out there. I want to bring in Madasal, a member of our team, because she has a question for you.
I do, John. First of all, congratulations on the film, and thank you for shedding a light on such an important issue. As a product of New York City schools, this was not part of the curriculum. But to that,
I am also a product of New York City schools, and yeah, I'm with you.
But I wonder, I know there's been nationally talk about telling stories about history from a different perspective, and there's been pushback from various and sundry groups. But I wonder, how do you see this film being sort of a model for teachers to teach this portion of history? Because I think part of the problem is there are teachers that maybe don't feel comfortable teaching this part of the curriculum, this part of history, but want to. So do you have any suggestions for what we can do as communities to bring these stories to life? Because it is such an important part of who so many of us are.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I love my job so much. Is I think that we can partner with educators. For John Lewis film, we have a student curriculum that can guide teachers through, a lesson plan that can guide teachers through. For Red Summer, I would encourage the teachers to watch on their own, to study that history, and to explain and contextualize what were the societal factors that led to this unrest. And I think that analysis, that understanding will help us understand where we are today. So we are, our entire team at National Geographic, a premier educational institution, is very hopeful that this will be an assistance to teachers, that we spent a year contextualizing and digging deep into documents and facts, and all of those resources are available to teachers to use and expand on. So, not teaching our history doesn't make it go away.
Yeah,
and
right.
so hopefully this film and other films like it, there are so many great films about Tulsa, and I encourage people to watch them all because it's such a large story that it requires multiple takes. But I'm so glad that you asked that question about education, because that is something so important to me.
Absolutely. All right, Dawn, well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing to educate all of us. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you being here with us today.
Her film.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and your film Rise Again, Tulsa and the Red Summer premiere on Friday night on National Geographic, also available to stream on Hulu the very same day. Dawn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.